Good day, friends. Early March 2018, and it's time for another Gord's Poetry Show. Number 54, to be precise. And getting all excited about the prospect of spring after the last couple of warm days. Up to 16 degrees yesterday. And now, of course, it's going to snow tonight, just to dampen everyone's enthusiasm. But myself, I refuse to believe it. I think the Environment Canada people are lying. They've taken a bet. They're betting each other around the office. I bet you I can convince them winter's coming back. It's some kind of thing between Environment Canada and CBC, I think. Anyway, you might not know Wen Fu's, my mistake. Louis Cheese Wen Fu. That is a short series of poems on the art of writing in kind of AD 300s. Translated by Sam Hamill, one of the founding editors of Copper Canyon Press, amongst many other attributes. And I just came across this today. So here we go, sailing through history as though not a second of it mattered, which it doesn't, of course. 1. The early motion. The poet stands at the center of a universe, contemplating the enigma, drawing sustenance from masterpieces of the past, studying the four seasons as they pass. We sigh. Seeing the interconnectedness of things, we learn the innumerable ways of the world. We mourn leaves torn away by the cruel hands of autumn. We honor every tender bud of spring. Autumn frost sends a shudder through the heart. Summer clouds can make the spirit soar. Learn to recite the classics. Sing in the clear virtue of ancient masters. Explore the treasures of the classics where form and content are born. Thus moved, I lay aside my books and take writing brush in hand to compose this poem. 2. Beginning. Eyes closed, we listen to inner music, lost in thought and question. Our spirits ride to the 8 corners of the universe, mind soaring 1,000 miles away. Only then may the inner voice grow clear as objects become numinous. We pour forth the essence of words, savoring their sweetness. It is like being adrift in a heavenly lake, or diving to the depths of seas. We bring up living words like fishes hooked in their gills, leaping from the deep. Luminous words are brought down like a bird on an arrow string, shot from passing clouds. We gather words and images from those unused by previous generations. Our melodies have remained unplayed for 1,000 years. The morning blossoms bloom. Soon night buds will unfold. Past and present commingle. Eternity in the single blink of an eye. Just a small introduction to today's reading. We'll do some more of that later. Louis Cheese Wen Fu, The Art of Writing. Only 1,700 years old. Maturing nicely, I would say. Canadian poet S.P. Zitner His book, The Hunt on the Lagoon. Nice cover. Unknown to me until very recently. Born in New York and taught English literature at various American colleges before coming to Canada to teach at Trinity at U of T. From 1970 to 1990, by the looks of things. Passed into eternity 2005. Some charming little poems in this book. The Mirrors. She was late. He'd been motioned to one of the Barcelona chairs near the mirrored wall. He sits too low to see himself in the Venetian looking glass across the room. The room is too bright, too loud, and the chair back catches him in just the wrong place. He is wrong for most of what she had grown up with. It was not the opposites that had attracted. They were a nuisance. It was choosing that table at this cafe, this film, this book, the consonance of phrase and impulse. How easily they could look inward and find each other. She enters the room. Jewels of rain are glistening on the fur of her coat and hat. He stands to greet her. They take each other's hands. The gesture reverberates between mirrors, a moment's intimacy, growing dimmer, diminishing with each echo. A little chocolate. The table talk is lapsing, and we leave for coffee and a sweet in another room. Don't switch on the lamps. The dinner candle light is light enough. This is our season of lingering twilights, when trees withhold their darkness, and all things hint at forgotten affinities. No talk or Coltrane yet. No odor of tobacco or perfume. As with a painting, everything is in abeyance, save for an intense singularity, a taste that briefly floods a single sense. Just for the moment, no one is thinking of something to say next. Been there before, haven't you? My love for Sue Goyette's Ocean book is probably almost infamous by this point. I've been raving about it for far too long, but it is awfully good. And I just want to, I don't think I've read the first poem in the sequence ever before. I've read plenty of others. This is number 1. The real estate agent chewed gum to cover the smell of bank on his breath and told us a snow fence would keep it out. That it wasn't so much like student housing, but a wishing well that would one day increase our property value. Oceanfront was like 24-hour shopping. We'd browse its surface and wonder who really needed all this stuff. And what a hurricane of a question. What a tidal wave of disruption. It got worse when we walked into it and let it taste us. Courtship. We had never heard of marriage, let alone ceremony. When we wrote our names in the soft sand of its back, we didn't know the first thing about commitment or about being out of our depths. Isn't real estate charming? Been through that recently myself, but that's another story. Don Coles, dear Don Coles, the great, recently taken flight to heaven Don Coles, from his Slim, that lovely book, Where We Might Have Been. One of these days I'll read from that novel he wrote, but so far I can't find a copy. Places by Don Coles. Maybe I'll have a little sip first. That's better. I was eating my supper in a booth at the Copenhagen Students' Union Cafe and reading Art Buchwald's column in the Paris edition of the Herald Tribune when a careful voice coming from just above the partition asked, "Could you tell me the time, please?" This was 50+ years ago, when I was less untidy than I am now and was wearing a watch, which I no longer seemed to need. So I soon had an answer for her. 7, perhaps. What sang-froid, looking back. Thank you, this person said. She had light brown hair and big soft eyes, and her face then went back, or down, out of sight behind a partition. I'm thinking of this because today's newspaper, Saturday, April the 3rd, tells me Art Buchwald is dead, which brings me back to the Paris edition of the Herald Tribune. What a host, as they say, of memories this conjures up. The girl turned out to be a nurse in training called Gittel. And a little later that evening we were among a congested bunch on a small dance floor of the Rode Pampernelle, which won't need translating. A place Gittel knew about, and a fellow about as tall as I was grinned at her as we were dancing, or rather standing, moving back and forth, mostly stationary really, and he also gestured admiringly at, I had the impression, Gittel's breasts, which were certainly in no way exposed, but were noticeable. Actually, she was wearing a sweater which wasn't tight, but still. Gittel spoke 2 quite short words, which my command of Danish didn't extend to, but which sobered him up right away. He may even have stumbled a bit. He was dancing too, after all. That was it for him. He ends here. Art Buchwald now, though, that really brings a lot back. I used to imagine being him, living in Paris, and writing even more wittily than he did. Columns about restaurants and the NFL, and art and the gardens of the Luxembourg. And my photo there instead of his. Similar saturnine smile. Could anyone be happier? At the end of the evening, Gittel and I sat talking for quite a while on one of the bottom steps of a long staircase in her nearby rooming house, both of us half glimpsing, I think, inaccessible seasons together. I say inaccessible because she had, earlier on, mentioned that the very next morning she must be on a train to her home in Egsberg, I'm going to get that wrong, all the way across Denmark for her half-term holiday, and my flight to Canada was booked for a few days after that, although I didn't say so. The newspaper's photo of Art Buchwald shows him on the phone from a bed in the stateside hospice he'd picked to die in. Kidney failure, the article says, and it says he'd declined dialysis as too boring. He's not in Paris, of course. Nobody's exactly where they might have been. Thank you, Dawn. I might add the next poem in this book is called A Lucy and Freud Moment. Maybe we'll do that another time. While I was searching for another Don Coles book down in the murky archives in the basement, which of course I couldn't find, I came across the final issue of that much-loved magazine, the Queen Street Quarterly. The final issue, 2005, Volume 7, Number 4. Is that too dark to see the nice imagery on the cover? It probably is. Oh well. Anyway, like all good magazines, they never last very long. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. Some magazines do last a while, miraculously floating above the turbid waters of bankruptcy. but not this one. All sorts of interesting stuff. An essay by the editor saying why they were quitting. And, well, you know, that's the sort of thing you're going to get. Suzanne Zelazo. Hope you're doing well, Suzanne, wherever you are. Certainly enjoyed the magazine while it was out. And here's something from one of the first things in this issue is a letter from Angela Rawlings saying, Dear Queen Street Quarterly, I admire your long lives, all 5, and the way your tail curls around tree branches. Oh, won't you read my poems? Won't you love them with the fierce admiration of a tail or a branch? If you love them, tap your wand 5 times in print. If you do not love them, may I show you others with brighter stripes and furrier leaves. That's pretty nifty, showing a letter from a would-be contributor. There's lots of good stuff here. But I thought we'd include Bruce Whiteman. He seems to have been working on various volumes of The Invisible World is in Decline. And as far as I know, he's still at it. I've got one of the early ones. Here's a little prose poem called Poetry, appropriately enough. I hardly think about it anymore. Poetry with its braggadocio and its cheap bounty. It surprises me constantly by its absence. Once I believed it was a way of being in the world, deciduous and antithetical. But really it is just a masquerade, like casual sex or a Protestant Sunday demeanor. The natural world disdains it now. No resplendent pine tree dripping cones and sap exudes poetry, nor irresistible mammal is taken in by it. No one thing about poetry anymore. Its risible blandishments go unnoticed, like sunset and moonrise. Poets fall into coulees, whispering dark consonants, mantle and sidereal. The libraries their poems fill are silent and unvisited, governed by a brighter music still. No degree of abandon is steeper. Poem piles up and no one's what to do with them. No one knows what to do with them. Like plastic wrap, they are useless and transparent, a logical nuisance. Mice scampering over their bodies make glass harmonica sounds. Tuneless, really, and caught naked in history's maternal stare. Poetry concentrates hard, but only manages a deftless disappearing act. And the world, let's all agree, is better off. Risible blandishments. That really does it for me, Bruce. Thanks. Queen Street Quarterly, fond memories. Irish poet Paul Muldoon. Been at it for a long time. Here's a couple of amusing ones from his new selected poems, 1968, 1994. I mean, there's all kinds of more serious, you know, ballady things here, but we'll just do a couple of the funny ones. History. Where and when exactly did we first have sex? Do you remember? Was it Fitzroy Avenue or Cromwell Road or Notting Hill? Your place or mine? Marseille or Aix? Or as long ago as that Thursday evening when you and I climbed through the bay window on the ground floor of Aquinas Hall into the room where Macnice wrote Snow? Or the room where they say he wrote Snow? Ireland. The Volkswagen parked in the gap, but gently ticking over. You wonder if it's lovers and not men hurrying back across 2 fields and a river. Talk about summing up your country in a few lines, I tell you. Nice one. We'll back at that one again. Relatively new poet to me. This is Susannah Shoulder, or Showler. Thing Is. Appears to be her second book. And nifty cover, I'd say. And, you know, people often say, reviewers and, you know, that sort of thing, say this poet is a fresh voice on the scene. And I always think, oh, come on. But Suzanne really feels like a fresh voice to me. And you may say, oh, come on, Gord. But listen to this. Can you rate your mood? Which I take to mean, does the word comorbidity feel a little cozy round the mouth? Some professional advice. Snap pics of your moles beside a ruler every 6 months. Progress appeals to me about as much as reincarnation. That is enough to delay the thought a little while longer. Besides, the best argument for repetition is any morning. How it's a one-way hinge on a trapdoor. Then there's the rest. Strangers beetling their way down wet stairs to the train. Umbrellas receding into armpits like anemones startled by underwater cameras. The station's creak machine warning birds, this is not your resting place. Each bird may be a consciousness recycled to dumb, puttering translucence who once knew the cosmos as moving vapors or took storms of living things into a basin mouth, swallowed through the fluttering goodbyes. Then on to the next. This possibility is one reason not to kick a pigeon in the chest and watch it try to flap its way into gravity's good graces, even when you know you could. I still recycle, by the way, just as I cleave to most civic fictions, like summing the eager button at the crosswalk, declaring myself to the non-existent registrar of pedestrians. What if my mind is just a very long public hearing and the inevitable crackpot has been at the mic all the while? For this and other reasons, I don't insist on what I know comorbidity could mean or should mean. A kind of love or brand loyalty. A good excuse to get the whole gang back together and ruminate. I like ruminating. Old world. Once I missed a train and killed a loose handful of hours idling in gardens older than the country I was born in. The light was a catcall I held off with formal pronouns, cultivating a distance I've since folded into regular rotation in my stock of moods. This isn't new, stitching a lone moment to what has followed from it, as though thinking through the past is just one more way to look for yourself. Still, I feel like telling you how I drank a bottle of champagne and peed under the half-barbed lace of a bush I imagined had been cultivated to flatter the royal view. My knowledge of history has always been solely so and so. So, of course, I was approached. When I wanted to say attention, I mean I was looking for evidence of being more than a pronoun set loose in a house with no rooms, concrete and rebar, sketch of a future that might yet be forestalled. Even then I couldn't see things, I couldn't not see things in terms of failure, that I was young and drowning in light, that escaped me. From here, the story is its own shadow, inhaling the space it's not in. I'm trying to tell you nothing happened, but I was still made after it. I took a different train, woke up in a new country. Since you asked. This whole business about unfinished business is bullshit. I don't know where the rumor started, but it's bad for the new ones, the way they arrive already jacked for some mission to fulfill, as though good behavior has rewards, like anyone's watching. That is, being dead is just another angle. Besides, the living look quite sweet from here. How they think they move so mysteriously, how they're always leaking. Really, don't get hung up on the whole death thing. It's just one gong getting its begged for gut punch. Spangled, showy sound, yet indistinguishable from all other gongs. Kicks off the action, but never the point. That you died will at first seem special, and you'll want to tend the moment like a wild, broken creature you could nurse back into the world. That never works. Death loses mass in its cardboard box, shedding details until it's too reduced to even try to bite the hand you haven't got. You won't be able to pinch its windpipe shut or bury it in any earth. What do I like best about being a ghost? Hard to choose just one thing. Maybe the soft wilt of remembering how you were once alive, but not who. The life lost becomes featureless, lovely as sheet metal, directing quick frames of light into nothing. Very nice, Susannah. Very nice. Lots of good poems in this book, and perhaps we'll get to some more. But really, you should be checking out Thing Is by Susannah Shoulder. Showler? Showler? Not sure. MacLeod and Stewart, publishers. Yes, lovely stuff. And that last one reminded me of that recent film, A Ghost Story, from last year. One of the most intelligent, insightful, and beautiful films about what ghosts can get up to when they're not sure what to do. Really, highly recommended. Now, Rue Borson, her new book, Cardinal in the Eastern White Cedar. Rue's been, writing for a long time. It seems to me at least, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s, I'm not sure. But she continues to write poems of fine perceptions and high quality. And good on you, Rue. The Varying Hair. As spring insinuates all things into being, reed, blossom, the early starling's coat of many colors, and with snow and rain in equal measure, so summer will come with horse-headed clouds. The golden legs of the wasp and creeping jenny bees look into as into the leaves of a living book. Such summer's evenings city lights reprise in sequence something of the starling's speckled coat, which darkens into autumn. Autumn which adores the varying hair, the wooden maps, and silver forests wherein winters yet to come prepare all things to be unmade. The horse as the horse chestnut, the harebell as the hare, till one dry stalk sloughs off its snow. So ends at least this world of thought. That was lovely. So ends at least the world of thought. That was so good enough I want to read another one. All right. Thinking of Thomas Wyatt's They Flee From Me. Thomas Wyatt, poet of 200 years ago. Imagine he's in all the anthologies. Now that I've heard at least half my friends making love, not altogether, mind you, passing a closed door in the hall, through casually opened windows or thin summer walls, even amplified once, the pipe beside the stove suddenly crying and grunting as I fried the eggs. It's as if I dallied with them myself, a little wearily perhaps, but after, knowing which one whimpers, whose fingers want to be licked, and now that all or most are scattered or else gone, and the nights, empty of those sounds, grow long, as long as those once but no more well-traveled highways stretched across the plains, town after town, with their motels strung with post-Christmas lights still glistening in the rain. Now, now. What a strange joy it would be to hear those cries again, to once more breach that privacy. Thank you, Rue Borson. Cardinal and the Eastern White Cedar, a new book. Oh, it's also from MacLelland and Stewart. Well, well, well. No payola here, I can tell you that. I wanted to read one of my own here. This is recent, very recent. I think yesterday, in fact. It's called Information, and it might touch on something some of you are familiar with. Suddenly, when someone is passing and your glance seems to piece every layer of personality, to touch some naked, defenseless core, one is thrust back 50 years to the peaks of LSD. When, in the welter of impressions and hallucinations, a mere glimpse of a face fronting body could penetrate every layer of desire, fear, motivation, and conditioning to reveal the innocence hiding, hoping to be discovered. The lost continent of childhood, the mystery of baby emerging from sleep, the miracle of conception, the challenge of incarnation, the misty silence of heavens withholding their highly prized information. Indeed, the mystery of heaven's withholding. It probably hasn't escaped your attention that the much-loved, well, I think she's mostly sci-fi and fantasy, Ursula K. LeGuin passed recently. And in the New York Times Book Review, someone wrote a poem for her, Naomi Novik, for Ursula. I want to tell you something true, because that's what she did. I want to take you down a road she built, only I don't want to follow it to the end. I want to step off the edge and go into the underbrush, clearing another way, because that's also what she taught. Not how to repave her road, but how to lay another. Even if it meant the grass came through the cracks of the pavement, and the thicket ate it up. I want to show you something that I dug up out of the earth inside, because she spent her life picking away at the tunnel veins. And in the next one over, through the walls, I heard her working. The rhythmic steady tick, tick, tick of her knocking at the stone, a music of the sharp end of a pen digging into paper, and tried to learn a rhythm of my own, how to get the weight swinging. I want to take your hand and put it on the breathing monster's side in the dark room where we can't see what we're touching. We only feel it's in here with us, too vast to touch all at once. Here it's rough and scaly, and here it's smooth and hard as bone. And it's turning even as we try to make it out. But she did her best to tell us of every part that she could reach, calling back sometimes from the far side, muffled by its bulk. And sometimes she put her hands on a tooth-serrated edge, but never without kindness. The teeth were there anyway, and she wanted us to know where we kept cutting ourselves. She never told the lie that the teeth were the only part that mattered. But I'll do all that tomorrow. Today I'll pack some tools, a wide blade knife and a rake, nothing with a motor. It's work I want to do by hand, and I'll wave to you, going the same way. Maybe we'll see someone wandering and call them over to come walk with us as far as the road goes. Together we'll rake up the leaves and cut the grass and pull back thorn bush branches, even if we've forgotten our gloves. and in the morning we'll say goodbye and go our ways again. Maybe you and I will walk together toward that high hill we caught a glimpse of a few turns back. We thought maybe the road would go there, but it never did. So let's go and try to find it. And if we can't quite get there, at least leave another marker on the way. Yes, the much-loved Ursula LeGuin. The great contributors to our literary culture. They pass on and move into eternity, where they sometimes turn around and wave at us. And I think the more you look for the wave, the more you'll find it. But, you know, that's just my opinion. What do I know? Anyway, another Gord's Poetry Show. Another splendid holiday in the luxuriousness of language. From 300 AD to right now. And guess what? It's all the same place.